Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, Chris Evans, has settled down in Washington, D.C. 2 years after the events of The Avengers, 2012, doing field work for S.H.I.E.L.D. while adjusting to modern life after 70 years under the ice. As the film begins, Steve meets Sam Wilson, Anthony Mackie, a retired pararescueman, on a morning jog around the tidal basin. Steve runs circles around Sam until he gets exhausted and settles down to rest. Sam suggests that Steve listen to Marvin Gaye's Trouble Man soundtrack while healing to catch up on the last several decades. Steve adds it to his list, alongside Star Wars, Star Trek, and the Rocky films. Steve receives a text message instructing him to stand at the curb in front of the Capitol. Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow, Scarlett Johansson, drives up in a car. Steve gets in the car after she welcomes the two men. As they fly over the Indian Ocean, the couple joins other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents led by Brock Rumlow, Frank Grillo. The Lemurian Star, a S.H.I.E.L.D. spacecraft, has been taken over by pirates led by Georges Batroc, Georges St-Pierre. They have Agent Jasper Sitwell, Maximiliano Hernandez, as a hostage. Steve, dressed as Captain America, jumps out of the jet, armed only with his shield and no parachute. He lands in the ocean and climbs aboard the ship, defeating every goon in his path. Natasha and the other agents descend to assist Cap. The agents fight the pirates and rescue the prisoners, but Batroc flees and is apprehended by Cap. They fight on the ship's deck, with Batroc rapidly rising back up on his feet even when Cap tries to knock him down. "I thought you were more than just a mask," he smugly replies. Steve takes off his mask and says, "Let's find out." He continues the fight, finally knocking Batroc down with his shield. Natasha is found by Steve using a S.H.I.E.L.D. flash drive to extract files from the ship's computer. When Steve summons Natasha, she informs him that Nick Fury, Samuel L. Jackson, has assigned her to a separate task. She pulls out the flash drive just as a pirate runs by and throws a grenade at the two. Steve snatches Natasha and leaps through an exploding window. Steve feels irritated that he was kept in the dark about Natasha's assignment. When Steve returns to the Triskelion, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s headquarters on Theodore Roosevelt Island in the middle of the Potomac River, he confronts Fury in his office. Fury's explanation that Steve wouldn't be comfortable if he was in the loop doesn't satisfy him. Fury warns Steve that he can't trust anyone, not even those who work with him closely. He takes Steve down a lift to the vast underground level, where 3 helicarriers are being worked on as part of Project Insight, an operation that connects the helicarriers to spy satellites used to prevent potential terrorist attacks and allow them to eliminate threats to national security. In part a reaction to the Chitauri invasion, Steve sees this as a more extreme kind of defense that makes the Strategic Scientific Reserve's compromises to win World War II look tame in comparison. Fury insists on getting with the program. Steve goes to the National Air and Space Museum to see an exhibit on his World War II achievements. When a child recognizes him in disguise, Steve puts his finger to his lips and asks the child not to point him out. The child understands and remains silent. Among the exhibits are mannequins dressed in Steve's World War II outfit and the costumes of Steve's fellow Howling Commandos, as well as a tiny exhibit dedicated to Steve's childhood buddy Bucky Barnes, Sebastian Stan, the only Howling Commando killed in battle. Steve watches a video of his old love, Peggy Carter, Haley Atwell, in which she reflects on Steve's activities as Cap. Later, he pays a visit to an old Peggy, who has now married and had children. She is unwell, and while she initially appears to recognize Steve, she quickly slides back into a state in which she believes she is meeting him for the first time since he went missing, and she is astonished to see him alive. He simply states, "I couldn't leave my best friend. Not with her owing me a dance." Fury tries to retrieve the files Natasha obtained on the flash drive, but he is unable to get beyond protection, which he appears to have created himself. He travels to see Secretary of Defense Alexander Pierce, NM000602, who is in New York for a meeting with the World Security Council about the hijacking of the Lemurian Star. Fury informs Pierce that Project Insight must be postponed. Pierce responds, "All right," but he wants Fury to have Iron Man come to his niece's birthday party. Steve pays a visit to the VA, where Sam is delivering trauma counseling to other PTSD-affected veterans. Sam tells Steve during the group meeting that he lost his comrade Riley in war in Iraq after being shot down in the air with an RPG. Despite the loss of his friend, Sam continues to enjoy flying. He inquires as to what makes Steve happy. He has no idea. While driving, Fury phones Agent Maria Hill, Kobe Smulders, to arrange a meeting for anything related to Project Insight. A police car drives up alongside Fury's automobile on the passenger side as he finishes up the phone and comes to a stop at a crossroads. Fury realizes that the officers driving the car are wearing sunglasses and are staring at him suspiciously, possibly because he is a black man driving a high-end SUV. The driver hits his siren for a split second before pulling forward. As Fury approaches the crossroads, another police car comes and T-bones Fury's car on the driver's side, causing it to collide with some bollards. The first police car comes to a complete stop and backs right into Fury's automobile. A third police car plows into Fury's car from behind, and several more units arrive swiftly, boxing Fury's car in. Then a black windowless vehicle arrives, bringing with it a full SWAT unit. Officers from the patrol and SWAT teams pull submachine guns and assault rifles and take positions around Fury's automobile. Fury's onboard computer informs him that there are no police units in the vicinity, implying that these cops are hired killers. The assassins begin fire seconds later, pelting the automobile with bullets. It's pointless because the automobile is armored and the windows are made of bulletproof glass. After that failure, they try their next approach, grabbing a hydraulic battering ram from their van and attempting to break the glass on the driver's side window. Fury retrieves a hidden minigun and starts fire as soon as the computer reports that the window's integrity level has reached 1%, killing most of the assassins and wrecking a few of their automobiles. He tells the automobile to drive itself out after a protracted exchange of gunfire. Fury's automobile takes off on autopilot, followed by two police cars. A protracted chase takes place through the streets. Two of the assassins' vehicles catch up to Fury and begin to trade paint with him after forcing their way through stalled traffic and another running shootout. Luckily for Fury, his internal computer notices a box truck approaching them at the next crossroads. Fury slams on his brakes as the assassins' cars go on, only to be broadsided by the truck. Fury tells the car's computer to take him to a safe spot and accelerates away. Before the computer can locate a safe location for him, he notices a man in black standing in the center of the road. The unknown mercenary fires a magnetic bomb, which sticks to the underside of Fury's automobile. It blows up and flips the automobile over. The would-be assassin approaches the vehicle, preparing to kill Fury, but he escapes in time by using a laser weapon to burn a hole through the roof of the car into the pavement below. Steve returns to his flat to see his attractive neighbor, Sharon Carter, Emily Van Camp, doing laundry. He offers to let her use his equipment, but she declines because she had just spent a long time in the hospital's disease ward and does not want to infect Steve. She informs him that he has left his stereo on. Steve approaches his house warily, clutching his shield for safety. He discovers a wounded Fury on his couch. Fury claims out loud that his wife kicked him out, but he demonstrates to Steve via text messages on his phone that anyone may be listening. Fury is shot 3 times before he can finish his sentence. Steve searches the window for the shooter. Fury hands him the flash drive and warns him not to put his trust in anyone. Sharon enters, armed with a rifle, to tend to Fury. Steve pursues the sniper. Steve bursts through the walls to pursue the assassin outside. He tosses his shield at him, but the sniper catches it with one rapid movement of his left hand and returns it to Steve. Steve catches the shield and is pushed back a bit before looking up to find the assassin has vanished. Natasha and Steve meet at the hospital, where they watch doctors operate on Fury. Maria has joined them. Doctors attempt to resuscitate Fury, but he collapses and dies. Natasha then asks Steve why Fury was in his flat. He denies ignorance just as Rumlow informs him that they need him back at S.H.I.E.L.D. Natasha labels Steve a liar, and they split up. We can see that Steve hid Fury's flash drive in the vending machine behind a pack of gum. Steve is summoned to speak with Pierce. He also questions Steve about why Fury was at his flat, hoping to learn more about who killed him. They suspect Batroc after discovering him the night before at a safe place. Pierce implies that Fury paid pirates to infiltrate the ship in order to obtain sensitive information, and was subsequently slain when the transaction went awry. Steve refutes the assertion. Pierce inquires once more as to why Fury was present. Steve just claims that Fury warned him not to trust anyone. Steve boards the lift, joined by Rumlow and a few strike team members. As the lift begins to descend, Steve realizes he's stepped right into a trap, as Rumlow and his guys have their hands on their firearms. At the first stop, two men in suits board, and Steve notes that one of them is perspiring considerably. Then, at the next stop, two burly men board and take up positions in front of him, effectively blocking him in. At this moment, Steve chooses to tell them he knows what they're up to, which prompts the men to attack him. They put magnetic cuffs on his wrists and an electric stunning rod on him, but Steve overwhelms them and knocks everyone out cold, with Rumlow being the last to go. Sitwell witnesses the altercation through a lift surveillance video and directs the strike team to the lift. Steve uses his shield to release the restraints and sees the strike team approaching. He cuts the lift wires in order to send the lift down to a lower bloom. As the squad closes in, Steve smashes through the glass of the lift, plummeting dozens of stories and landing on his shield in the plaza. He dashes to his garage and drives out on his motorbike, avoiding the traps set up by S.H.I.E.L.D. A Quinjet appears and shoots at Steve. He tosses his shield into its engines, grounding it and allowing him to jump over it and escape. Sitwell directs S.H.I.E.L.D. operatives to keep an eye out for Steve. Sharon questions why they are conducting a manhunt for Captain America. Pierce enters the room and declares him a wanted man for withholding information about Fury's death. Steve returns to the hospital to grab the flash disk from the vending machine, but it is no longer available. Natasha comes, chewing gum and indicating that she discovered it first. Steve shoves her into a room and demands to know everything she knows about the enigmatic assassin. The assassin is only known as the Winter Soldier to her and spy agencies. He nearly killed her on a mission in Iran, during which the person she was supposed to guard was assassinated, and he is said to have been responsible for over 200 assassinations over the last 50 years. They decide to use the flash drive to learn as much as they can about the whereabouts of the Winter Soldier. Pierce meets with WSC members again, portraying Fury as a martyr, despite the fact that they believe he was slain to cover up his own unlawful actions. They all decide to restart Project Insight. Steve and Natasha dress up as a normal couple and go to the mall. They take the flash drive to an Apple store and insert it into a MacBook Pro to locate the signal from Wheaton, New Jersey. Natasha informs Steve that they only have 9 minutes before S.H.I.E.L.D. agents arrive. On their way out, the pair notice Rumlow and his men scanning the area. Natasha pulls Steve in for a kiss on the escalator to divert attention away from themselves, because public displays of affection make people feel uneasy, and make faces difficult to see. Rumlow is not aware of their deception. Steve and Natasha follow the signal and arrive at Camp Lehigh, Steve's old training base. As they approach the gates, Steve sees his former, smaller self rushing past him. He and Natasha walk into the facility, which turns out to be an original S.H.I.E.L.D. office. They come upon framed photos of Howard Stark and Peggy, as well as Colonel Chester Phillips. Steve discovers a computer room hidden behind a bookshelf. The only modern technology in the room is a little flash drive port. Natasha inserts it and turns on a computer. A German voice speaks and discusses the two. Dr. Arnim Zola, Toby Jones, is the Hydra scientist in charge of creating Red Skull's many weaponry. After being diagnosed with a terminal illness in 1972, he transplanted his consciousness into a computer. Zola informs the two that Hydra was founded on the notion that mankind could not be trusted with its own freedom, and that after the war, as part of Operation Paperclip, the US government recruited Zola and other Hydra operatives, who conspired against their new employers. Since then, S.H.I.E.L.D. has just served as a cover for HYDRA, influencing history from the shadows, including different politicians and even Howard and Maria Stark. As a final surprise, Zola explains that his entire explanation speech was designed to keep Steve and Natasha from being targeted by a missile Hydra has dispatched to knock them out in less than 30 seconds. As the rocket hits, Steve and Natasha dive into a hole, destroying the computers. As the building crumbles, Steve defends himself and Natasha. Rumlow and his men arrive and search the area, but the two have managed to flee. Pierce bids farewell to his housekeeper, Renata Branca-Caddick, in his home just before the Winter Soldier appears in his kitchen. He never says anything. When Renata returns to grab her phone, Pierce begins talking to him. Pierce shoots her twice after remarking that he wishes she'd knocked because she's seen him and the Winter Soldier chatting. Steve and Natasha hide out at Sam's house since they know they can trust him. Natasha apologizes for her cooperation with Hydra agents. Sam agrees to assist them, but first they must obtain the necessary equipment, an EXO-7 Falcon flight suit. When he begs Steve and Natasha to recover the suit for him, they scoff and claim it'll be simple. Back in Washington, Sitwell leaves a meeting with Senator Stern, Gary Shandling. Stern gets in close and whispers to Sitwell, "Hail HYDRA." He then receives a phone call. Sam, who is standing in Sitwell's line of sight, tells him to get in a car and drive around the corner to meet him and his pals. Sitwell is taken to the roof of a tall building by Steve and Natasha. Steve threatens to throw Sitwell over the ledge. Sitwell is well aware that this is not Steve's style. Steve agrees, and gives Natasha permission to kick Sitwell off the roof. Sam grabs Sitwell and throws him back onto the roof. Sitwell, now terrified for his life, admits that Zola devised the algorithms utilized by Project Insight to locate specific persons around the world based on personal facts or data. The targets are chosen based on their previous behaviors, allowing Hydra to simply track down and eliminate anyone who might pose a threat to them before they have a chance to fight back. Sitwell agrees to comply and accompany them, knowing that Pierce will very certainly have him killed for leaking secrets. The Winter Soldier ambushes Steve, Sam, and Natasha as they accompany Sitwell to a safe spot. The assassin from Hydra rushes onto the hero's car, yanks Sitwell out the window, and throws him into the path of a truck. The assassin is joined by several strike team members, who immediately ram their car into the inside guardrail. The Winter Soldier exchanges fire with Natasha, while Steve and Sam engage the Hydra agents in a gunfight. At one point, the Winter Soldier believes he has discovered Natasha lying behind a car and fires a rocket at her, but it is actually a recording played back on a phone. Natasha leaps onto the Winter Soldier's back and tries to garrote him from behind, but he easily defeats her. She tries to flee, but the Winter Soldier grabs his gun and shoots her in the left shoulder from behind. Steve attacks him as he climbs into a car to finish her off. After a long fight, Steve finally defeats the Winter Soldier with a judo throw that knocks off his faceplate. To Steve's surprise, the Winter Soldier is Bucky Barnes, who is still alive and has no idea who Steve is. Bucky appears to recognize Steve when he calls him by name. But, after a little pause, he pulls out a gun and prepares to shoot Steve, only to be stopped by a well-timed strike by Sam. Bucky regains his footing and attempts to shoot Steve again, but is forced to sidestep as Natasha fires a grenade at him, destroying a nearby car. Bucky flees as the smoke clears, and Rumlow and his surviving soldiers apprehend Steve, Sam, and Natasha. Rumlow and his men put Steve and his pals onto a van, intending to transport them to a remote spot where they will be executed and buried in unmarked graves. While being driven, Sam notices Natasha is severely bleeding from her shoulder and informs the guards that she requires aid. One of the guards accepts and immediately pulls out an electric rod to paralyze the other guard before kicking him in the head and removing her helmet, exposing herself to be Maria Hill. She assists them in escaping the van by digging a hole in the floor. The strike team is unaware that their detainees have vanished until they come to a halt in a storm drain and unlock the back doors to extract them. Maria transports the heroes to a concealed facility in a hydroelectric dam to heal Natasha. Fury is also present, resting from his injuries. He survived the assassination attempt because to an anti-stress serum invented by Banner to handle his Hulk condition, but which can also be used to fake one's own death. When he and Natasha have had a chance to rest, they convene with the other heroes to plan an attack strategy. They don't have a lot of time. Project Insight is expected to begin in a matter of hours, at which point the three helicarriers will form a triangle and lock sights on targets all around the world. The people that will be targeted range from very small to extremely major dangers to HYDRA. Fury pulls out 3 chips that will be used to bypass the helicarrier's systems. He delegated command to Steve to issue commands. The HYDRA agents work inside a bank to repair Bucky's arm, which was damaged during the struggle with Steve. He experiences fleeting recollections to his previous existence, from his fall off the train to when Zola and his Hydra thugs discovered him. He had his left arm amputated and replaced with a bionic metal limb. When he started freaking out, Zola sedated him and eventually put him on ice, only thawing him out when Hydra needed him to assassinate someone. Pierce enters, admiring Bucky's work and inviting him back to do it again. Bucky inquires about Steve, claiming to be acquainted with him. Pierce tells the agents to return Bucky to his previous murderous attitude after realizing he is regaining his memories. Steve stands on a bridge, reflecting on his time with Bucky. Bucky and Steve are seen in a flashback after Steve's mother's funeral. Bucky agrees to let Steve stay with his family on the condition that he shine Bucky's shoes. Sam approaches, ready to join Steve in the fight. Before going to the Captain America display to steal his vintage World War II uniform, Steve encourages him to gear up. The elderly security guard, Stan Lee, notices the missing suit and predicts that he will be dismissed. Pierce leads the World Security Council members to the Triskelion. He issues them electronic pins that grant them access to the entire building. Steve and Sam infiltrate the building. Steve activates a microphone, which connects him to every speakers. He informs the SHIELD operatives that Pierce is a traitor working with Hydra and that Project Insight must be stopped. Rumlow and his thugs storm the control room. He coerces an agent into releasing the helicarriers, but Sharon steps in. Rumlow is forced to down his gun by her. He does, then pulls out his knife and slashes Sharon's arm. A gunfight ensues, and the majority of the SHIELD technicians are slain. Rumlow manages to free the helicarriers despite the gunshots. As the Hydra agents blast at them, Steve and Sam make their way to the helicarriers. While Sam flies around, Steve places the first chip into one of the helicarriers. He successfully directs a heat-seeking missile aiming at him to strike a helicarrier, allowing him to put the second chip there. Meanwhile, Hill keeps track of their progress while killing any Hydra agents who try to stop her. Pierce attempts to persuade World Security Council members to approve Project Insight by portraying it as a peaceful endeavor to deter future threats around the world. He offers Councilman Singh, Bernard White, a glass of champagne, but Singh declines and tosses it. Pierce pulls out a gun and points it at Singh, but Councilwoman Holly, Jenny Agutter, throws him away and then kills down the other Hydra goons in the room before snatching the gun. Natasha, it turns out, took Holly's place, using extraordinary technology that allows her to exactly replicate a person's face. To Pierce's surprise, Fury emerges from a helicopter as her backup. Fury removes his eye patch, revealing that his scarred left eye also carries a retinal scan, allowing him to bypass Project Insight alongside Pierce, as they are the only 2 agents of the highest degree required for that. Pierce activates the pins he handed each council member, which burn deeply into their sternums. He threatens to set off Natasha's, compelling her to accompany him out. Natasha triggers it, burning herself slightly less severely than the others. This offers Fury the opportunity to murder Pierce by shooting him twice. His final words are "Hail Hydra." With over 700,000 agents and counting, the Hydra agents begin to lock on their targets. As this occurs, Bucky is unleashed, killing the SHIELD operatives attempting to assist Steve and Sam in taking down the last helicarrier. He rips Sam's wings and tosses him from the helicarrier. Sam is able to use his chute to break his fall. He returns to the Triskelion after landing to battle Rumlow. Steve meets Bucky inside the helicarrier, attempting to persuade his closest friend that millions of people could perish. Bucky continues to assault, refusing to listen. Bucky steals the chip from Steve as he rushes to replace it. Steve wounds both of Bucky's arms before putting him in a headlock until he releases the chip. Steve hurries to insert the chip into the system, but Bucky grabs a revolver and shoots him, severely injuring him. Despite his injuries, Steve manages to attach the chip with only seconds remaining on the clock, phoning Hill to override the helicarriers. To the surprise of the Hydra agents, the targets fall offline. With the systems disabled, Hill orders the helicarriers to commence fire on each other. One of the helicarriers collides with a dam beneath the Triskelion. The second slams into the Triskelion, taking Rumlow with it. Natasha and Fury fly their chopper in time to capture Sam as he sprints like crazy through the window. Steve and Bucky are still inside the third helicarrier as it falls. Steve decides not to battle his friend and throws his shield off the helicarrier. Bucky savagely punches him across the face repeatedly, even as Steve chooses to stick it out with him until the end, repeating Bucky's pledge to him that he's with him to the end of the queue. This appears to shake Bucky out of his trance, as he pauses just as he's about to deliver the fatal blow, remembering when he shouted those words himself. Steve is thrown from the helicarrier and falls into the water below. He falls unconscious, but not before noticing a hand reaching out towards him. Bucky drags Steve to the shore before going away. In the aftermath, Steve recovers in a hospital while the song, "Trouble Man" by Marvin Gaye plays. He awakens to music and Sam keeping vigil by his bedside. Meanwhile, Sharon applies for a position as a CIA field agent. Hill goes on an interview with Stark Industries. Senator Stern and other corrupt officials who accepted bribes from Hydra are apprehended by the FBI. Rumlow is also found alive but with severe facial burns among the debris. Natasha is summoned before a committee hearing to answer for her involvement with SHIELD. She argues that even if they wanted to imprison her, they couldn't since the council members know they need her and her allies. She walks away calmly. Meanwhile, Fury destroys all traces of his presence, including his passport and eye patch, by burning them. Fury joins Steve and Sam at his own grave in a cemetery. Fury's name is engraved on the headstone, along with the words, "The Path of the Righteous Man." From Ezekiel 25 verse 17. Fury informs Sam and Steve that they only need to come here to his grave if somebody begs for him. Natasha arrives to tell the guys that this is Fury's way of saying, "Thank you." She hands Steve a file he requested before suggesting he ask Sharon out. Steve examines the paperwork pertaining to Bucky and his Winter Soldier transformation. Sam realizes Steve will be looking for Bucky. Steve informs him that he is not required to accompany him. "I know," Sam responds. "When do we begin?" Baron Wolfgang von Strucker, Thomas Kretschmann, is reviewing recent events with a fellow Hydra scientist, Dr. List, in an underground Hydra facility somewhere in Eastern Europe in a mid-credits scene. Even if the American branches of Hydra have fallen, they still have many followers around the world who are carrying on Hydra's work. Strucker, in particular, is in charge of human subject experimentation with extraterrestrial weaponry, including Loki's scepter. During their conversation, Strucker and Dr. List decide to check in on the two successes of their work, fraternal twins Pietro, Aaron Taylor Johnson, and Wanda Maximoff, NM064764. He possesses superhuman speed, while she possesses telekinesis. Observing them, Von Strucker remarks, "It's no longer a world of spies. Not even a heroic world. Doctor, this is the age of miracles. And nothing is more terrifying than a miracle." The screen goes black as Wanda uses her abilities to smash two cinder blocks together. Bucky wanders through the Captain America exhibit at the Smithsonian and discovers an exhibition of himself in a post-credit sequence. He looks at it pensively, trying to recall his old life.